girls, Tiffany Dawn here, and today is the long-awaited video that has been requested for months now about long-distance relationships. So over the last few weeks, I went and interviewed 4 married couples who all were long distance for a significant part of their dating relationship. And so I asked them a bunch of questions that you girls wrote in, and so today you get to hear their answers. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like it, comment your thoughts, and hit subscribe if you haven't already.
Hi there, I'm Scott, and this is my wife, Katria. We've been married for just over 10 years.
As you can see, we're expecting a baby. Had a long distance relationship, we moved cross country together.
Now we're having a baby.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm Travis, this is my wife, Rachel. We met at PBU, Philadelphia Biblical University. We met at the pudding bar, very delicious.
We've been married for 10 years.
We have 2 kids, and we were long distance.
Hi, I'm Alan, and I've been married to this woman for 32 years. I know I don't look 32, but I am.
Been 32.
And I would get to see this beautiful lady when I was out here during summers, and the rest of the time we had to communicate from a distance. I was in Indiana, she was in New York.
And you had to pay for every minute you talked on the phone.
You can't talk until you give your name.
Oh, I'm Patty.
Patty. And we are Tiffany Dawn's parents. We take full responsibility.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
We're rolling?
You are.
You're so uncomfortable.
I'm cool.
Hi, my name is Maggie, and this is Brandon.
Hi, I'm Brandon.
And we've been married for 6 years. Brandon and I met when we were in college. About 1 year of our relationship was long distance.
Yeah, 1 year. But it was the first year. She spent time in India, she spent time in South Africa, and she spent time in Bulgaria.
How did you have people get to know you as a couple and hold you accountable when you were long distance?
One of the great things about our relationship to begin with was that we were all part of the same group of friends. I mean, I had a few friends that you didn't know, and I think sometimes when I was like hanging out with them, you might have gotten
Who's
a little...
that chick?
Yeah. When you were away and I would like hear of these like cool South African dudes that were taking Maggie to World Cup stadiums and stuff, I'm like, who are these guys?
And when I was traveling, first thing I would talk about is how great my boyfriend back home is and how we're best friends and how we know each other and love each other so much. And talking about Brandon was really easy because he was such a huge part of my life.
I lived with a couple who was married and their children, and I just rented a room there. So whenever he was around, people were with us and getting to know us. And when we were at his house, I had to stay with his family. Scary.
Because the other person's so far away, it actually allows you and encourages you to keep the relationships that you currently have. And so that can help your life stay more in balance.
I think accountability-wise, we both had strong networks of friendships.
I sought out a lot of mentors at school. They would ask a lot of hard questions. It wasn't like, dating now, we were online and these were so immersive, and with our MCI phone cards, we were paying by the minute.
We had phones that at times had cords, so you couldn't leave the room.
That's true.
So your roommates heard everything you were saying. We were really excited to include our friends in getting to know each other. So we had lots of game nights. I was in a sorority, so we had dances. So he'd come up for dances.
To just keep really open lines of communication with the people in your life. Video chat the other person while you're hanging out with your group of friends, so they're in the room with you on the computer screen. Don't keep that part of your life separate from the rest of your life.
So how did you know that you wanted to get married, even being long distance?
Well, there comes a time in any relationship when a young man's fancy turns to thoughts of marriage. Sometimes he needs a little helping along, though. We'd been dating for 4 years, and it was kind of a transition in our lives. And so she put the question to me one weekend. She said, "Where's this going, Scott?" And I said, can I have a little time to think about this?
No, I think it was much more cruel than that. Yeah. I asked if you wanted to get married or if I should apply to grad school, but I didn't care which one. And you did freak out a little, but we'd been talking about it before.
Yeah, we had been talking about it for 3 or 6 months.
Yeah.
Because Brandon and I were friends for so long, we got to see each other date other people. I distinctly remember before Brandon and I started dating, talking to my friends, my girlfriends, and saying, whoever marries Brandon Fromm is gonna be a really lucky girl. And that ended up being me. So that was cool.
What brought us closer together was that we liked each other and we loved each other and we like had commonalities, but like we could have easily grown apart and like found somebody probably equally as great, you know? Like that would be sad now thinking about it, but like this idea that like God has one person for you, like we're not really like in that camp. So if you believe in soulmates, I'm really sorry. But I think sometimes going into a relationship thinking that there's like this one person out there for you means that when you get to marriage, like you think it's going to be easy, and it's not always easy. Like you have to work at it and you have to be kind.
It all starts with a commitment from yourself. If you rely on the other person to make the marriage successful, you've already missed the point. It is not something of a 50-50 in marriage. It is 100-100, and you don't expect anything from the other person. Your commitment is your commitment.
Early on, I don't think we really felt pressure to really define the relationship. Like we were just okay with being friends for a while and getting to know each other.
We were on the same page from like the moment that we met. My tip is to get to know people who know that person. You really don't know if that person is who they say they are.
Knowing what other people think about that person is probably more valuable than knowing what that person thinks of themselves.
Do they work hard? Can they hold a job? How do they treat their siblings or their parents?
I had people praying over me for a long time that I would know when I met my husband, that I would know that he was the one. And I did. It wasn't like something that I don't think happens all the time, but it was an answer to prayer.
I knew for sure after you got back from your travels, because I knew that if we could get through that, then we could get through anything. So after she got back, I moved out to Albany, put a ring on it.
So how did you guys deal with boundaries when you saw each other again?
So growing up, neither of our parents really talked to us much about boundaries, and like the conversations we did have, they were presented as more of like an all or nothing proposition. You know, either you had sex or you didn't. But practically, there's a lot of ground in between those 2 points.
And those are points like we didn't talk about in the beginning.
Well, the boundaries we did have
Were clear.
Yeah, you know, boundaries, you know, to respect each other, you know, to honor each other, you know, not put each other in like an awkward position.
And I think that's what made us fall in love and marry each other, is that we did feel safe and secure. Setting those boundaries is really important because you do feel loved.
When I went up to visit, we were with her parents and hanging out with her family. We did a lot of things with friends. That was obviously really helpful.
We weren't alone, basically, when we got together. That was it.
Yeah.
That was probably the boundary.
Yes.
That's actually one of the things that we wish we had done differently when we look back on our relationship. I would suggest that establishing those boundaries, like having the conversation ahead of time, treating it like a real threat and not just ignoring it and letting it happen, which is what we did. We just kind of oh, oops. We went farther than we would have liked to. We felt a lot of shame about that. You know, you always hear like nothing good happens after midnight. That's so true. When it's late at night and you let your guard down, you know, whoever you're staying with is gone to bed.
We were in a church that everybody was kind of watching you.
Did you guys find it like tough to keep your hands off each other when you were long distance, or not really, or?
He did.
So like what did you do to help?
I said, back off, Jack.
It's just you have different standards because there's two different people that grew up with different standards throughout their life and expectations, so you have to discuss those.
And you have to keep discussing them.
So how do you deal with trust in a long distance relationship?
I think in any kind of relationship you're dealing with trust. The distance just means there's maybe, you know, more time and opportunity to be untrustworthy.
Or paranoid.
That's right. Yeah. We had a community we were built into. And if things had been going on like off the radar, you know, those people would have pulled us back in line.
Well, and we had mutual friends too, so we kind of knew of each other. Had like a whole army of spies checking in on Scott. So
I had no spies.
You don't.
Yeah, you don't.
You don't know if that person's worthy of your trust unless they've earned it. Trust is something that needs to be earned. You had earned my trust in getting to know you over the years, and I had earned your trust.
Yeah.
When we were long distance, I knew I could trust you no matter what.
It's hard. Again, it goes back to what Patty said about you need to get confirmation that they're a person of integrity And to get that confirmation, you need to go to multiple sources. And they can seem to be so Christian and so wonderful and so God-fearing, and in reality that's not who they really are.
By the time that we met, we were serious. We weren't like talking to other people. And I don't know, it was understood. Like, you and I are exclusively talking to each other for the purpose of marriage. I would have never questioned.
Is there anything you would recommend? Signs of untrustworthiness?
Watch where his eyes are going when you're out on a date.
Someone who's faithful and trustworthy in the small things would be faithful and trustworthy in the larger, more important things. I tend to think that.
It's kind of like that study where they had the children and they said you can either eat this one marshmallow now or you can wait and have 2 marshmallows later. And some of the kids, in fact most of them, couldn't wait long enough to get the 2. So they settled for 1. So some of the signs that you can look for is whether people are willing to wait.
And I think it's nice to know what the other person's doing, like on a day-to-day basis. Like, I felt close to Scott that way, like knowing who he was interacting with and at times meeting those friends, what classes he was going to, things like that. Like, all that just like helps me outline his day, not in like a stalkerish kind of way, but in like feeling like I was part of it and feeling like he was involving me in that.
That's true. In any kind of relationship, like, it happens within the context of your life. If you separate a relationship from the day-to-day concerns, then that's where things get maybe murky and there's more opportunity, like, for trust to be misused.
And you won't know unless you spend time with the person. So even if you have a long distance relationship, you have to spend the money and take the time to spend time together.
So if you're going to spend a bunch of money to visit someone, like, how long should you wait? How do you know you're ready for that?
I wouldn't go to some person's house that I don't know anybody that knows a thing about this person. Even if I have had a relationship online with them for 10 years, you need to get some feedback from others and find somehow someone who knows this person. Or bring your mom with you. Yes, bring your big sister with you. Bring a couple of friends with you. Go to church with them. Look and see, do people at church really know them?
So how did you get to know each other really well, even though you were long distance? What did you do to build that?
It started by building a really solid foundation at school. Eventually started praying with each other and sharing our stories with each other. So after she left, we talked to each other pretty much daily or every other day. We'd work into our schedule of different visits. So either I'd go up to New York to visit, she'd come down to PA to visit.
Did you guys have cell phones in this year?
Yeah. So my dad bought me a track phone for school, and he said, "Son, this is just for an emergency. Like, only use this for emergencies." And so I think he put 400 minutes on it. And so I'm like, I'm never going to use that. And so I met Rachel, and then I think it was the next week. I'm like, "Dad, I used all the minutes."
When she was in India, and I was student teaching, so I was going to bed when she was getting up, and vice versa.
So there was a whole time difference thing.
Yeah.
The way we would communicate to each other is we would record videos in photo booth, and we would send them to each other in our emails.
It was like a diary almost.
Yeah, it was like a video diary that we had kept with each other, and I wonder if we still have it.
I still have all the videos.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
So when we first started dating, our relationship was based a lot on talking about like day-to-day activities. And I think probably around like a year and a half, like we kind of figured out we liked each other and we had to start talking about things that like mattered.
For the first couple, or maybe like the first year or so, I think both of us were kind of waiting to see, maybe something better comes along.
So true.
Yeah. Unfortunately, nothing ever did.
We would pay almost as much as it would cost to rent an apartment on phone bills.
Not really quite that much, but
Close. Or writing letters.
we recorded ourselves on cassette and sent cassettes back and forth.
Exactly. And so you had to be more creative as to how you talked about things. So actually it helped in getting to know the other person. Except there is that factor about a person of their quirks and their personality and that you don't get to know. So you get to know other things.
So the last question is simply, is there anything else that you think are important for people to know if they're dating long distance?
Probably the most notable long distance relationship is that of God and man.
True.
And you have a situation where God and man actually dwelt together in the garden and they found themselves far apart. And so one thing to know is that you've got a God who actually has experienced it. He knows exactly what you're going through.
I think for any dating, my recommendation is that you pray ahead of time for God to open your heart to what you need in a spouse and also who you are bringing to the table to a spouse.
A lot of times people are always wondering, well, who's the right one for me to be with? But then I think it's also very important to become that person for that other person as well, so that you're becoming Mr. Right or Mrs. Right by loving Jesus first.
It's really important to keep things exciting when you're dating long distance because you're dating, so it's important. Scott used to write me letters, and we're both artists, so he would like illustrate them. I think you did a whole series of stories for me too.
I did.
Yes, you had really good dates when we were in person too.
Yeah, I had months to plan them out.
It's true, yeah.
The most important thing about dating long distance is communication. I mean, it's really the most important thing about any relationship, but it's so much more important because you lose a lot of the body language, you lose a lot of the physical connection of just being in someone's presence.
Oh, thank you so much to each of the couples who shared your wisdom. And if you're in a long distance relationship, what helps you? And then we can all read the comments and learn from each other too. So girls, have an amazing day. I will see you Friday for an everyday summer makeup tutorial. And by the time you watch this video, James and I will be in Serbia. What? So if you're not already following along, be sure to follow my Instagram at Tiffany Dawn IQB because I'm posting pictures like every day. Love you girls. Bye.
Where am I going with it?
I don't know.
I think that works though.
Does that work?
I'm so happy that I'm creepy.
Yeah.
Should we start over?